computer. Hi, everybody. Welcome to New Research at Noon. This week, we are celebrating our last session of the year with Chevy and with Davida, and we'll start as soon as folks begin to arrive. Welcome, Davida. Welcome, Chevy. Here comes Annetta, our librarian. Nice to have you here.
Hi, Tara. Nice to be here. Thanks so much for organizing this. I'm so excited.
Hey, Annetta. I'm glad you're here.
Hey,
I'm going to have us on speaker view because that way when our guests are speaking, they'll show up in a big frame in our recording, which is great. And we'll give folks just a few more minutes and then we'll get started. Here comes Melissa. Anne, thanks for coming. Anne Estelle.
Hi. Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
Hi, Melissa. Thanks so much for coming. Nice to see you. Happy end of semester.
Oh, not quite yet.
Not quite yet. We're not there yet, huh?
Not quite. At the end of April.
The grading, Sam reminds us. Oh, Nisha. Oh, my goodness. It's Nisha Toomey who is here on someone else's account. And I'm really glad you told me. I haven't seen you for a long time. It's so
Hi. Sorry. I have to figure out how to rename myself here, but might not be able to.
Oh, well, welcome. We're really happy to have you here. I think Davita's on someone else's account too.
Oh, shoot. I am. Thank you. I better change that.
Yeah, here comes Jeff. Jeff is our librarian at
Daniel.
New College, works with Annetta. It's so great to have you here, Jeff. I'm just going to close my email so we don't get too many bings. And I think we're ready to begin. And folks who haven't arrived yet can connect with us when they arrive. Catch is here. Nice to see you. Lovely to have you here.
Okay. May I ask, are you the only, is Nancy also co-hosting here?
No, just me.
I don't know if you can do this and if it's worth it, but if you're able to change the settings so that I can change my name.
Okay, do you know how to do that?
That'd be great. But otherwise people will just have to know who I am.
Okay, I'm not sure how to do that. Is Nancy still with us?
So it's okay, people, I'll just.
Tara, I think you can rename.
I can
By going-
rename?
Yeah, go to the box.
Yeah.
And I think if you are the host,
Yeah.
yeah, you are. You can click the three dots and then just hit rename. If they
Oh, where
like the three dots of each person's box,
Okay,
the top right corner.
right. Davida, remind me whose name you're working with?
Davida Goldberg.
Right, I know, and whose account are you on?
It says
Well, I'm on Daniel Strauss, so you'll see.
Daniel, right.
Strauss, yeah. I see.
I'll go more, rename. Yeah, good. Oh.
Yeah. Next time I'll know to
Thank you,
sign out. before I
Sam.
sign in.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, you could do that too. Old fashioned, old school. Okay, rename. Let's see if that worked. Yes, Sam, I need to buy you a drink. Okay. Well, as soon as we're out of lockdown.
we will hold you to that.
All right.
Look forward to it.
I look forward to it too. All right, we are ready to begin. Welcome everybody to our last session of New Research and Noon. Today's theme is research on morality and social justice, a wonderful way to begin our last New Research at Noon. We are going to continue the series next year. It's been very popular and folks have really enjoyed it. So if you know anybody who is teaching at New College and still working on their thesis work and would like to talk a little bit about their PhD journey and where they're at in the process, our undergrads are always interested in hearing their stories. So today we have Chevy Eugene and Davida Goldberg, and Chevy is going to talk about their thesis on the role of the creative arts in mobilizing young people in the Caribbean. And Davida is going to talk about reinventing moral worlds in the 20s and 30s. But before we begin to hear about their work, we're going to begin hearing a little bit about themselves and their doctoral journey. So to begin, we're going to ask you both just to tell us a little bit about the teaching work that you're doing right here at New College this year, and then tell us where you're doing your PhD work, what's the program that you are part of, and if you don't mind, why did you decide to do doctoral research? It's not something that everybody decides to do, and I know we're all interested in why. So Chevy, if you don't mind beginning, we'll have you unmute and just tell us a little bit about your teaching at New College and about your doctoral journey.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for having me here. In the process, I just want to say one thing. Anybody could feel free to ask me a question except for Sam. I wouldn't be answering any of Sam's questions. That's a disclaimer. But so I'm currently doing my PhD at York University in the Social and Political Thought program. I'm actually hoping to wrap up this coming summer. So I'm actually in self-exile within the quarantine. That's my goal. That's my dream, at least, right? That's my dream. I'm actually not teaching at New College, but I'm with TYP. I'm working the transitional year program. Currently, I am teaching the Black Canadian Studies course there, which was first introduced this semester. And I see one of my students just came in. Ash, big up yourself. Special shout out to Ash. Thank you for coming through. And I'm also TAing. I'm TAing at York University with Ola Mohammed, Professor Ola Mohammed, and Andrea Madavatsky in the Cultures of Resistance in America's course. I actually took that course as an undergraduate student, and it's one of my favorite undergrad classes. So I'm thankful to be TAing that class. And in regards to why I decided to do a PhD, this is actually, I'll try my best to make it 5 minutes. It's personal stories in regards to dreams as a child or goals as a child, and how does that impact in Canada, my livelihood in Canada. So I'm actually from the Caribbean and from St. Lucia, migrated to Toronto in 2002 to meet my family. My family, I have extensive family here, my mother, etc., sisters, siblings. My goal, my dream has always, first and foremost, I'm an unapologetic Caribbeanist. My goal and my vision has always been for a united Caribbean, whether it's from a political, cultural, or social. So I'm a Caribbean integrationist. This has always been my vision in thinking of the Caribbean and moving forward for us to actually have a meaningful conversation in the global market. Because from a cultural perspective, Caribbean culture influences the world. When you look at Toronto, when you look at language, dress, style, music, it's a global thing, right? But in regards to the political aspect and economic aspect, I always felt like not just me, just the discourse that comes out of the Caribbean, the importance of an integrated Caribbean to be relevant international players, right? So during my undergrad, my last year, I applied for my master's. I was applying for a master's in humanities, and I was speaking to Carl James. My goal was to create, for, like I said, an integrated Caribbean from using art, using the creative art as a tool to mobilize young people in particular around the importance of Caribbean integration. So Carl James suggested to me, why don't I, for my master's, created a template of what that could look like, and for my PhD, I could try to apply that. Although this is not where I'm at right now, but the premise is the same in regards to using the creative imagination in pushing Caribbean integration. And so my first year, I completed my master's doing that exact same thing, creating a template of what that could look like. And my first year as a PhD student, I was doing a fellowship at the UN for the people of African descent in Geneva. But from that first year to my second year, I could not escape reparations. So my current project is on Caribbean reparations. So I could not escape reparations. Everywhere I went, people were speaking about Caribbean reparations, and they were pushing the idea as something. They were reviving a conversation that started, well, you could say right after slavery, post-emancipation, but from a political perspective in regards to from a cultural relevancy. It started in late 2000s. Right? So everywhere I went from the fellowship, I'm hearing about reparations, and I decided my final project during the fellowship was to be a project about Caribbean reparations and how practical that is, right? So it started from there. When I came back to Toronto, I reshaped my idea of what I would love to. I'll shape my method, I should say, in acquiring or pushing for Caribbean integration. And I realized that reparation is something similar. It's a political message about justice, right? And at the same time, civil society are not, when they think about reparations, they see it as something very far-fetched and not possible, right? And the research that was coming out at the time with eminent historians like Hilary Beckles, Brian Shepard, Michelle Johnson, to name a few, were pushing for Caribbean reparations and constructing what that could be like. What does it look like? And what I realized that the gaps that were in that conversation is the disconnect from everyday people, like I was saying, particularly young people. And I was just thinking, I was holding a meditation or reasoning, using Rasta language, reasoning on that, thinking of how can we get young people involved in that conversation? Now, when you look at the creative arts is something that goes beyond borders, right? Where politicians might give speeches to try and encourage people, the creative arts is very fluid. It goes beyond borders and it engages people. When you look at reggae music, the role that reggae music and Rastafari has played in politicizing Jamaica, in challenging, using as a creative weapon, in I don't say dismantling, but challenging colonialism and neo-colonialism, how Rastafari has brought that African identity in the Caribbean. I'll say it started in Jamaica, but it went beyond the Jamaican borders through the music, through the culture, and through the liberty, and through the spiritual practice, right? So these were the things that influenced me in my journey in doing a PhD. I would say by being an unapologetic Caribbeanist, the creative imagination, the creative arts, because as someone as an artist, and I put that in quotes, I used to do spoken word before, and also an emerging filmmaker. I have my film coming out hopefully at the end of the summer. I wanted to be my present to myself, in addition to the dissertation, right? So I emerged the creative arts in my research because that's the only way I could stay in academia for so long. I have to add the arts in it, right? So these were the amalgamation of those factors kind of influenced my research and maintained my sanity in post-secondary school. Thank you.
Chevy, thank you so much. That was a superb answer, very engaging answer to our question about your journey. Many people, when they start talking about their journey, will point to some personal aspect of their life in their communities, and you have followed that tradition, and it's very exciting. We are also excited to hear you're a filmmaker, and that at the same time as you have the hope and the goal to finish your PhD thesis this summer, you also want to bring out your film. And it was exciting to hear how your art is influencing your PhD work, how your PhD research will influence your art. I'm a playwright. I have my own little independent theater company, and I have done the same thing, not from the beginning, but around mid-career, I started to use playwriting and my theater practice to complement my research so that I too could imagine feeling creative at the same time while I was living an academic life. And more and more folks that we speak to are doing the same. There's certainly an arts-based research culture at New College, which is developing, and it's so exciting to hear about your work that way. And we're going to come back and hear more about the actual project after we talk to Davida about her experience working as a writing instructor and how her journey came about. So Davida, would you mind unmuting and starting to introduce yourself to us?
Hi. So So my association with New College is about 2 years old. It's wonderful because I get to work in the Writing Center and I get to meet and at New College, we have the Caribbean Studies program and the Equity Studies program. So I get to learn a little bit about those topics, and I get to learn about so many topics. It's like being able to be everywhere in the university. It's such a great thing for me. I hope it's good for the students too. I love talking to students, and I love the one-on-one. And I think that really one of the main questions we're asking right now is, how did I come to do a dissertation? Well, I think really I should have been a teacher, but I never thought that I could manage classrooms of students. And I didn't know until I worked at the Writing Center at York that there could be a career in teaching at the university level. So that was something that I came to realize after already being in a PhD program. So how did I get into the PhD program? Well, first I did my undergraduate here at University of Toronto, and I did a minor actually at New College in a program that no longer exists called the Humanism program. And it was awesome. I just loved that program. It was like the whole Western canon in 3 courses. We, started from Homer and, touched into Dante and ended up with like Gilbert Ryle, or I don't even know who we ended up with. I read War and Peace for those courses. Of course, I read War and Peace in my Christmas break underneath my desk while I was a receptionist in a Midtown Manhattan office. And that's the only reason, I think I was the only person in the course who actually read the book. And that's the only reason I could read the book, because I was being paid $9 an hour to read that book. And nobody told me to stop because there was really no phone calls coming in. And I also had this incredible privilege of just temporality, because I was in undergrad during financial boom time. So I was able to spend my Christmas break earning $15 an hour as a receptionist in Midtown Manhattan. And in the meantime, I never really thought I was going to go to undergrad at all. As I started undergrad, I didn't think I was going to go to grad school. As I was, doing my MAs, I didn't think I was going to do a PhD. That's because at first I wanted to be an actress. And when I was in New York City, I took courses at AV Studios, and I'm mentioning this just because I'm having fun making these connections with art. And I wanted to be a novelist, and I wanted then to be a journalist. I love the Atlantic magazine. It's still my favorite thing to read. And I'm constantly telling students that, you have to read that middle ground material before you go into high school. Students read textbooks. In university, you're immediately thrown into Foucault or PubMed, where authors are grad students speaking to other grad students quite often. So you need to read that middle ground. The Atlantic magazine is my favorite thing to recommend to everyone, including adults. And it gave me a kind of a romance of what it would be like to be highly intellectual, but still kind of public intellectual. What I really want to do is not speak to other scholars, but speak to people and say all sorts of different things. So the other thing about my trajectory as an academic is that I'm a jack of all trades. When I began my undergrad career, I was really interested. I immediately started the semiotics program. That was my major. And that's out of Victoria College, because when I learned about what semiotics was, somebody defined it as the theory of everything. And that is what I have always wanted to know. I've wanted to know everything all at once. And I've kind of never managed to discipline myself. So I ended up doing an MA in anthropology. And then I thought to myself, well, there's so many amazing anthropology figures, and nobody outside of anthropology reads them. Like Jean and John Komaroff, Nancy Shepherd-Hughes, Obia Sekari, Marshall Solins. I don't know, some of those people are names that people in this group will know of, but they're amazing scholars that unfortunately don't, anthropology is contained to some degree. And I wanted to be a writer for the Atlantic Monthly, where I could go and talk about what's happening with mothering in Brazil, like Nancy Shepherd-Hughes does, and write a 30,000 word magazine article and then move on to do something else in some other part of the world. I also did a lot of traveling because partly out of pure naivete, because I thought that I would understand other people besides just understanding myself. I mean, that's naive to some degree. So in any case, that's And then I did an MA in writing because I thought, okay, so anthropology, it has this containment factor. I don't want to be an academic. I didn't want to do a PhD. I was going to be a writer. So I started with an MA. And then I had a bunch of children. And then I was sitting there trying to nurse my 6-month-old, and I was kind of bored. And the thing that I was actually doing professionally was I had kind of almost accidentally become an editor. I started to freelance edit for professors at Brown University and at Brandeis University. And I edited a few dissertations, and I thought, oh, I can make something out of this. But I'm sitting there nursing my baby, and I'm like, day to day, I'm not getting up to publicize myself. I'm not getting around to making this into anything. So I said to myself, hey, I should do a PhD, because then it'll give me some structure. I'll be taking some courses, and I'm really good at being in courses. I love talking in a group of 10 people. And then at the end of the PhD, I'll have a book. And by then my kids will be a little bit bigger, and I'll have the wherewithal to build something, build more of that book, build more of that freelance career that I haven't managed to do, build more of the editing business. So I got into this PhD, not because I'm an idealist academic scholar, which, maybe I shouldn't admit, but I'm admitting it because I do that kind of thing. But just because it seemed like something I'm very capable of doing. I was interested. I love intellectual life. I thought I would bring my anthropology chops to my PhD. I ended up reading too much Kafka and went on a completely different, topic than I began with. And at this point, and then I got really into the teaching aspect, and I love teaching. Even when I was TAing courses, I spent like 35 hours a week preparing my 2-hour tutorials. And I did not get much dissertation work done. And these days I love teaching at the Writing Center. So like Chevy, the semester's done. I'm going to spend this summer. I'm going to write this dissertation. And even from the very beginning, and I'm saying this just again, out of total frankness and honesty, because I can't pretend to be like Chevy and have such a great vocation, what's the word, calling for your research. I like what I research. I think I have something to say, but at the end of the day, I need to get this dissertation done. And in the very first month of my PhD work, this guy who was just finishing sat down with me, and he said that to me. He's like, dissertations are not your opus. They're not your epic book. Just get it done. And I believed him, but I have not been able to follow up with that. So that's this summer.
Excellent. So both of you have big summer plans, and we're going to keep you in our thoughts and encourage you from afar. Maybe I'll write to both of you once a month and see how you're doing, because encouragement is always good. I tell my own graduate students, the dissertation is a credentialing project. It doesn't have to be everything you might say about a particular subject. It needs to be a story that shows that you know how to do academic research, and that will be a credentialing project to get you the letters PhD. What's so interesting about your story, Davida, is that at the center of it is your desire to be a writer, and your passion as a reader, and your interests are so wide and broad and also deep that there are many things that you can write about. And I really appreciated hearing about your goal to be a public intellectual, and reading and writing, in your case, the middle ground, because for many folks who want to have access to big ideas, the kind of writing that many academics do just isn't accessible. And your desire to both read and to write in the middle ground is an art form of its own, like playwriting, like filmmaking. And I think we hear a lot of that from our new college New Research at Noon speakers, because there is something about wanting to border cross between the world of academic ideas and the lives of people who want to hear about these ideas that are important. So very exciting to hear how you got there. And I will write to both you and Chevy this summer, see how you're doing. We are going to stop for a moment just to give the folks who are here a chance to ask you both a question or two and or to comment on what you've heard so far. And then we're going to move into the next set of questions, which focuses more on your actual research. So let's take a moment and just unmute and say hi and introduce yourself and ask your question or give a comment. And if that feels a little bit intimidating, you can put it in the chat and I'll keep my eye on the chat. So the floor is open. Questions about Chevy's story, questions about Davita's story, what you've heard so far, comments are welcome. We'll take a couple.
Chevy, I'd like to know where and when I can see your films.
Thank you. Is that Nisha?
Chelsea.
Chelsea, sorry, great. Thanks, Chelsea. Go ahead, Chevy.
Chelsea, I'm trying to figure out myself. But no, like my goal is, I'm actually meeting my editor to, he's in the third phase of editing, or the third scene out of the 4 scenes. So my goal is to have it the latest by the end of summer and hopefully in the fall semester 2021. And the goal of the film, so the name of the film first and foremost is called From Slave Ships to Relationships, Narratives of Healing. So it looks at the effect that slavery had on Black intimacy and the family and talking about healing processes, right? And actually, while I'm speaking, my film editor has called me right now. That's a sign, so hopefully it will be done by then. So the film was shot across the Caribbean, well, at UWI campus in Barbados. We did some shooting in Brazil, in Switzerland, in Ghana, in Canada, obviously, and London as well. So the idea was to retrace the triangle of trade and speak to young people about relationships and love and academics and artists as well. So for me, the artists have always played an instrumental role in imagining what new possibilities and Black futures could look like. So we kind of give them that space to speak about it and young people to talk about intimacy. So I'm saying all this to say the film will be done, hopefully comes out in the fall of 2021.
I love this. I feel like it could be part of the curriculum at New College and also at UWI. You should look into that. Sounds brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, hopefully Professor Goldstein could purchase it on behalf of New College.
I would be delighted. And New College is always looking for exactly that kind of event. And we'll work together and figure out what is the best way to launch your film. And if we are working in person, that would be even more exciting. But if not, we'll figure out something on Zoom. So excellent. Thanks for the question. Katya has a question, and I think I saw Sheila with a question too. Katya.
Oops. Okay, you can hear me?
Yeah.
So actually, it's not a question, it's a comment. I feel very comforting. I don't know if you can say that word, by hearing how, this research is more a process and it's not like a straight line in life. And then and so that I really liked, and I adore also the fact that people admit that to keep your sanity, you have to do like something that's more creative and artistic, because that's what I'm doing too. Because yeah, me it's more in the singing thing. I'm more like a singer in music, but I like the fact that like you can nourish your research with art and vice versa. So I really appreciate that aspect of trying to find a balance in that process of researching. So that was just a comment. I really appreciated that aspect of
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Sheila, did I see you perhaps getting ready to ask
Okay.
or comment?
Yeah, thank you. This is fabulous. Thank you to both of you. I love the trajectory of how Writing Center instructors find their way to it. And, you know, they're a fascinating group of people. But Chevy, I missed the very beginning, unfortunately, of your talk, but maybe just as we go forward, I'm so curious about how you work between poetry and the academic world. I really liked what you said about needing to bring it in to your PhD work in order to stay there. But do you think of it sometimes in terms of like a different way of thinking or a different way of being that is also something that we could think about in terms of pedagogy at New College?
Wonderful question, Sheila. And Chevy and Davida, just so you know, Sheila is a beautiful poet as well, and also combines her work as an academic and in the Writing Center with poetry. So Chevy, the question was, how do you work between poetry and the academic world?
So for me, good question. It's more than poetry. I actually started off, like I said, many years ago before I was in academia as a spoken word artist, because I saw the word as something that's very powerful. And for me, like I probably will reference in a lot of personal stories, because these questions and that path or that journey is connected to my personal life and the way I think about it, the way I construct things in my head, right? So spoken word has always been part of my life in the sense of growing up around calypso music, growing across reggae music, growing up with reggae music, and the role those tools played. Even for example, in coming from St. Lucia, as I mentioned, calypso was very powerful in creating laughter and challenging political thought, politicians and the politics, or the politics, as one would say. So the foundation of the music, the wordplay, has always been, like I said, to challenge, or like I said earlier, I should say, to challenge the dominant narratives and to reimagine something new. And your question, Sheila, kind of connects to part of my work. Hopefully I get to answer that shortly in regard to the importance of poetry or the creative arts. So for my theoretical aspect of my work, I look at, and I know that's a question we'll be going to in a second. So I'll just touch on it slightly now. I look at Sylvia Wynter in her deconstruction and reimagining of something new, the importance of poetry. So Amy Césaire, when you talk about the homonards and the role that poetry has, or the role that poetry has in deconstructing and creating a space to reimagine and thinking of something new. So when you talk about I think the question you asked, or the word you use in regards to different epistemologies, I think the epistemology that could come out of it is the deconstructing in regards to decolonizing, in regards to my work in particular, and the reimagining. I keep repeating myself, so I'll be silent here.
Thank you. We'll look forward to hearing you talk a little bit more about that when we get to the next part. We have a great chat going. I just wanted to put reimagining something new down. Okay, I think we're ready to move on. We're almost halfway through. We're a little more than halfway through to our next set of questions. And Davida, we'll start with you this time. Can you tell us the title of your project? What's it about in that accessible way that you've spoken about, and what drew you to this particular topic? You have so many interests, and you've decided to spend some time on this one, to read about this topic and then to write about this topic. What drew you to this topic?
There's a Freudian phrase, the return of the repressed.
Yes.
I feel like this topic was kind of just kept returning accidentally, and I kept trying to repress it in a way. Because, okay, so the topic right now, it's titled something like The Idea of Authenticity in Late Modern Europe. By late modern, I mean interwar, and 1920s and 1930s. And why does it keep coming up for me? in my philosophy minor and undergrad, I loved Nietzsche and Kierkegaard. I loved the kind of thinker that's like super ironic and just an amazing diagnostician. And I find that basically most European thinkers are like most of the European thinkers I like have been ironic, wry, amazing diagnosticians. And then in like the second half of the book where they try to like propose solutions, they're usually totally off. So basically I'm a reactionary, and I keep going back to kind of fight and contend with the ways that these thinkers have been off. And then I try to say to myself, wait a second, like I'm much more interested in the concrete. And I start with this concrete question of like, what matters? What is ethical? That's really, for me, it's very concrete. What is ethical? And then I've ended up in courses where, things become more theoretical than I like. And then I end up kind of accidentally playing that game. So basically what I'm trying to do is be able to do both things. I want to talk about a history of ethics, but not just a history of ethics. I want to talk about it at like an even more theoretical meta level, like a meta history of the history of ethics. And I want to do that by looking at very specific human beings who wrote memoirs and letters. And my hope was that by trying to like anchor something in a really concrete moment, I'll be able to talk about something that otherwise, on the one hand, ethics is the most concrete thing that we have. And on the other hand, it can kind of take you into a galaxy of gas in terms of ideas. And the reason why, I guess, and what I mean by being reactionary is like, in the semiotics department that I was a part of, in the humanities department that I'm currently a part of, there's a lot of a comp-lit kind of tradition. There's a lot of post-structuralism, a lot of people reading Heidegger, the discussion is often ends up being very, very conceptual. And some of those thinkers are very committed to the conceptual. They talk in a poetic way. And this is where I think if they would just say that they were poets, I'd be happy with them, but they don't say they're poets. They say they're philosophers, and that they say that they're saying things that are distinct. So they talk about ontology. It's so important to know what it means to be. And as I read these thinkers, I think to myself, no, I don't think ontology matters. I think ethics matters. And so Heidegger was a sworn Nazi, and we're still reading him in 2021. I've kind of been trying to cancel him. But apparently in order to be able to cancel a thinker, you have to be first a scholar in that thinker, and I don't want to read him that well. So I'm kind of going round and round about it. And now let me try to get more concrete with you. My topic right now is the interwar period, and I'm looking at these specific figures, starting with Kafka, who I ended up being kind of falling in love with because I was kind of forced to write an essay about him in my first year of my PhD. And it turned out that Kafka is this catalyst for all these ideas. His life, he lived in Prague. He died in 1924. He was a Jew, and I'm Jewish. And I never thought that I would write about being Jewish or Jewishness or anything like that, because that's, I don't know, there's something almost embarrassing in a way to just like talk about something that's a little too much about yourself, But I found that Kafka's problem with authenticity just opens the whole field up, the whole field of ethics, because the authenticity ethics that he was responding to was the key to all of kind of modernist thought from the beginning, even when over and over again people kind of pretended to reject ethics or pretended to reject authenticity or tried to reject society because society is inauthentic. And then you have Kafka, who feels himself to be essentially inauthentic because he's a Jew, because he lives in Prague and he doesn't have a mother tongue. he can't even, in a way, he can't even call himself a diasporic Jew because he doesn't have a connection to a mother tongue. And his life is, he hasn't chosen authenticity as an ethics the way that many of the kind of really European thinkers have chosen it as a form of kind of rejection and rebellion against European society. He, you know, so yeah, I'm circling around, and as you can see, I think I could be much more articulate in a month from now after I've really reviewed all this material. It's been too long since I've thought about this stuff, but I hope that what I'm trying to I hope that what I can leave you with is just that there's a whole history, and it's still going on today, and there's multiple times happening at the same time today, and there was multiple times happening at the same time back in 1920. There was a kind of 17th century modernism going on at the same time that there was, in a sense, a 21st century modernism going on in 1925. And and the reason why I've chosen that time period is because there's so much contradictoriness, and yet there's some kind of clarity of hindsight that I can get. And there's this figure of the Jew that comes out as a kind of spoiler for it all. And I'm hoping that, you know, when I put this down on paper, it'll make a lot of sense.
We really appreciate, Davida, you working it through. We know it's been a while since you've been back to it. Both you and Chevy talked about using the summer to return to your work, and sometimes having an opportunity just to talk things through in the way you did with us today leads you somewhere. I'm going to save the chat because I've been taking notes on things you said, and maybe some of that will help. But one thing that stood out for me was something you said early on, and you wanted to be careful of who you spend time reading. And I think that that's a very thoughtful thing for us to work with. The PhD journey has us spending a lot of time reading, and to the extent that you continue to write about your research and do film work about your research and hear people wanting to talk to you about your research and your film, you really do want to be careful who you read. And of course, who we read evolves over time too. So I think that as a story for how you are engaging in your PhD journey is really interesting. We're going to turn back to Chevy now. And Chevy, we had a great opportunity to hear how your desire to do the research you're doing was connected to your personal life. So I think and the moment you are living in. So I think I'd like you to talk about an important moment in your doctoral journey so far. And you can also talk about an important moment in your filmmaking journey so far, because both of those journeys are happening at the same time. So Chevy, would you tell us about that?
Yeah, so an important moment in my PhD journey so far, and film moment, I'll say for the PhD, I'll start with the PhD first. Was in 2019, I did a research stint as a visiting scholar at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica, Mona campus, at the Center for Reparations Research under the supervision of Dr. Vereen Shepherd. Now, my time there was, for lack of better words or adjectives, very magical. In the sense of, from the very first time I landed, the first day I landed in Jamaica, I was actually, well, the place I stayed called the Yard. The Yard was in that space were creatives and professionals, and I was put in that space there, one of my committee members, Dr. Anna Ford Smith, which some people are actually familiar with, and that Yard kind of supports whoever comes in that space, in the sense of, if you're an academic, they'll have times where they'll break bread with you. They'll sit with you, they'll bring other creatives, other academics. I met a lot of Caribbean thinkers in Jamaica, and particularly at that Yard, who, when they heard about the topic I was in on reparations and how do we engage with everyday people, the the place where I was staying, the person who owns that space brought a group of creatives together, like I mentioned, academics and community activists together, and we were breaking bread, or what Walter Rodney calls, or the Rastafari call, grounding. We were grounding, reasoning in the sense of we are learning from each other, right? In sitting with each other in the midst, working class community, sitting with each other. So it was good to hear people's thoughts around what reparations could look like, the struggles with it. So I became a sponge, and was good to engage with everyday people who have to live through the notions and thinking about reparations. So that was one of the things that experience, that academic experience brought to me. And another one during my stay at Jamaica, the very first night I came, I started with that. One of the neighbors took me to a reasoning session, and that reasoning session was led by the very first Rastafarian son who was living in the States, and he came to have a reasoning session with all the Rastafarians and community members. And in that space, the great Muta Baruka was there, the poet Muta Baruka, the activist. For those of you who don't know who Muta is, he's very controversial. Some would say controversial in his thinking. He's a very powerful voice in the Rastafari community in Jamaica and in the Caribbean. And just a side note, he doesn't wear shoes. So even when he travels to the international performances, he doesn't wear his shoes. He goes to the plane not wearing shoes. But he's a very interesting figure. I'm saying it to say he was there. And for those who are familiar with Caribbean history or the politics of the Caribbean, not familiar, during the Grenadian Revolution, Maurice Bishop was assassinated, and by one of his, it is argued one of his close friends. The revolution was dismantled. America came in and squashed it, but the person who worked with Maurice Bishop and went to jail, and people say he and Maurice had issues at the end of the revolution, and he's currently living in exile in Jamaica. He was at that space. I know it's kind of interesting because I always read about him in books. I never knew how I feel to be around somebody like that, but he was in that space and was part of a conversation as well, he and his wife, so that's very interesting. And another interesting moment I had in Jamaica, I was fortunate enough to go to Black Space, which is run by Dr. Erna Broadber, Caribbean intellectual literature literarist. She held a session, a grounding session, and the main question of the grounding session: what happened to the Black radical tradition, right? And in that space, you had retired professors who mentored my mentors, right? So it was really interesting to have an intergenerational conversation with activists in the US. And one of my colleagues, my close friend, was an activist in Brazil, was visiting at the time. So he was part of the conversation, an Afro-Brazilian, talking about reparations in Brazil and what does that look like. So these were moments for me were very instrumental in my method of my research, that method of Walter Rodney's grounding, right? Sitting with community members, sitting with community to hear about their experiences, how they think about issues. So you have everyday people in civil society informing your research and challenging popular discourse. Sheila asked about epistemologies and poetry and creating new epistemologies. And for me, part of that creating new epistemologies and decolonizing or dismantling older epistemologies or Western canon epistemologies is to hear from everyday people and how they think through their everyday life and engage in conversations such as reparations. I think I answered the question, unless there was a second part to that.
I was just interested if there was also a magical moment on your filmmaking journey.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. So when I was doing, I have to give a breakdown of what the film is about, well, the different segments of the film. So my film is in 4 phases, 4 scenes, 4 main scenes. The first scene is looking at West Africa, particular communities. For instance, I looked at Cape Coast, I look at Ashanti Kingdom in Ghana, particular communities and kingdoms, and how the family structures were before transatlantic slavery, right? That's the first phase of the film. The second phase is what took place during transatlantic slavery, right? From the first kidnapping of the enslaved African from the coast in the dungeon in Elmina or wherever, whichever coast they were, whether in Nigeria or South Africa. But I particularly look at Elmina dungeon in Cape Coast, Ghana. That's the second part of the Middle Passage, And also I look at what took place on the plantation, the violence, the forms of resistance, because I'm trying my best not just to look at transatlantic slavery from a, yes, it's a very oppressive thing, but I also want to look at the forms of resistance during that oppressive space, right? And the third part looks at everyday experiences now. So when you look at movements like Black Lives Matter, when you look at, when you think about relationships and intimacy, so trying to capture the current moment. And the fourth part is thinking about Black futures, particularly building from Robin Kelly and his imagining of Black futures, right? So these are, and the thing is that it's not I am giving my opinion. You have experts, but the questions we are asking are from everyday people, like young people. So when you're watching the film, you might disagree with something someone is saying. The idea, the way I'm editing the film is to try and capture folks' voices. Now, this is the background of the film. So when I was shooting in Ghana and Elmina Dungeon, I remember as if brother Audrey was actually speaking to a couple of days ago. He's from Canada, but he currently lives in Ghana. When we were going to, because I wanted to start the documentary with opening the door of no return, because as from those of you who are not familiar with the dungeon, there's a door of no return. It's called a door of no return. And the enslaved Africans, when you walk through that door, they never return. But on the other side, it's called the door of return. So I wanted to start the film from opening the door of return to show that we have come back home and walking through that, right? So we went there to try to capture that scene. And in getting there, my older brother Audrey, he saw a priestess that he knows. And she came, and she and another priestess who was coming via Nigeria, came to feed the ancestors, have a feasting ceremony for the ancestors, right? So I was fortunate enough to go with them and document their experiences while they were doing ceremonies of feeding the ancestors. And like I'm so thankful, because if they were not present, I have to go the traditional route with the tour guide, etc., which I think would have taken out the value, the sentimental and the spiritual value of that piece, right? So I was fortunate enough to go to the different dungeons, and they did the special ceremonies. And when we went into the special dungeon where they had the enslaved male Africans who resisted slavery, they did special prayers there, they poured libations, and one of the priestess gave me a rock to this day that I still have. She's like, hold this rock for whenever you travel, whenever you need strength, remember your ancestors, right? So I travel with that rock. It's always in my traveling bag. It's still there. And when we went to the dungeon with for the enslaved women, she gave me a rock, and they've never met. It's the first time I'm meeting them. One of them gave me the rock and said, give this to your daughter for when she needs strength. And to this day, my daughter has this rock. My daughter was a kid now, a baby that time. Well, she was around 8, 9 that time. She didn't like, okay, what am I doing for stone? But now she's older and she knows the story, like she holds on to it, right? So that moment for me was a very magical moment, and like I can't explain it, so so hopefully I answered your question. Yeah.
You did a great job. Well, I think we will turn it back to the folks who are here with us to ask if there are any more questions after ending on a magical moment like this. I really think that we need to let the moment sit with us. So let me open it up to others, either unmute and just say hi and share a comment or a question. And if you're feeling that you would prefer to do it in the chat, I'll monitor the chat. But where we've landed is we've landed in a place where we have heard, very great understandings of people's process, of Chevy's process, of Davita's process. We heard a little bit about a magical moment during the journey. We're hearing about the challenges ahead and the summer work that Chevy and Davita have. Anything that folks want to say to our guest today? Another question, a comment since the last time we spoke? I'm hearing a lot of responses to the story. There's a whole conversation for Davita, folks wanting to share who they like to read with you. But as we start to close up, anybody else want to ask anything? Melissa wants to read the dissertations. Sam wants to watch Chevy's theme, Chevy's
I
film.
just have a comment,
Yes,
if that's okay.
please.
I just wanted to thank you both for sharing your work today. I myself, I love learning. I enjoy research, but I'm not terribly keen on academic styled writing. And so it's really just, it's inspiring to hear how you fused creativity to keep your own journeys going. It's inspiring for me. So thank you so much. I really appreciate today.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Anyone else would like to say anything at this time? We're interested in everything.
I got something.
Please, Ash.
I think I've exhausted Chevy with asking him questions in our course. I'm kidding. My question is actually for Davida. As you were speaking, as you were thinking out loud earlier, I noticed myself. You know, I'm in the transitional year program, entering undergrad this coming year. And when you spoke, I was like, I want to take everything that you just said. I want to take humanism, so I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question, or I don't know if it's even a question, but just to, you know, like, help me. How do I wrestle with wanting to learn everything?
Oh my gosh.
Great question.
The problem is that the semiotics department, I think there's still courses, but there's no more major. But it's still, and also I don't know if I would recommend it as a first go, because it's kind of like you, at least in my day, it takes you straight into really academic kinds of styles of writing and thinking. But like I was saying to somebody else, the religious department is like a really interesting department. And people think that people don't consider it if they're not like specifically interested in theology, or people think that I spoke to a student recently who thought that she didn't want to take a course in the religious department because she's finished with dogma. And actually it's not there. You're not going to find dogma there. You're going to find some really interesting, like, big ideas. I don't know, anybody else? Good departments?
I put religion there, and your comment about it being full of big ideas. I think, Ash, one of the things that lots of us love about New College is our focus on interdisciplinarity. So in Caribbean studies, you can take politics, economics, literature, and filmmaking, and what holds the program together is an interest in Caribbean studies. Same thing for African studies, same thing for critical studies and equity and diversity. You're able to come at a common topic in an area that you might be interested in from a range of disciplines. So while I don't know you well enough to recommend a particular interdisciplinary program, women's studies, gender studies, same thing, diaspora studies, same thing, I have a feeling you'd be happy in a program that was interdisciplinary. And then Davida said, yeah, New College has a Buddhist and psych program. It's called Buddhism, Psychology, and Mental Health, but it's only a minor right now. And Davida,
could I also make a comment to Ash?
Please.
So sorry to interject. I also came out of TYP, so I can understand his conundrum. And my advice would be to just take what you're interested in. Because you'll find that actually there's a lot of crossover that you might not have first imagined. For me, I'm doing drama, Caribbean studies, and women and gender studies. And I'm finding that there's a lot of crossover and there's a lot of interest that I can take one from one and borrow from the other. And it's very interesting. So I think just honestly, just do whatever floats your boat.
That's superb.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So I think that's superb advice. So I think on that note, we also have the idea, look for crossover courses. I think that's a great idea. On that note, I'm going to ask us all to unmute and give our speakers a warm round of applause to thank them.
Thank you
was
so much, Chevy.
wonderful hanging out with you, Davida and Chevy. Thank you for sharing. We had a very rich conversation for our last New Research at Noon for the year. And I meant it. I will just, no pressure, but I'll be getting in touch to say hi and see how you're doing. So you know that there's somebody looking out for you. And we'll look forward to seeing you both at New College. And here come all the thank yous. You should read them and enjoy them. Everybody else, have a
Thank you.
great spring and summer, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for the space, Davida, to connect, and hopefully we get to follow up. I responded to your email. Thank you, the entire New College team, for allowing me to share my story on your platform.
Thank you.
And hopefully I get to see you soon.
Thanks. Thank you, Chevy. It's so interesting to hear what you're doing. And I really look forward to actually connecting with you and Ed and other people who we were connecting with over chat and throughout.
All right, then. Everyone, likewise, Davida. Take care. All right, bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Sarah, so much for this opportunity. Thank
Oh,
you.
it's so my pleasure, my absolute pleasure. And thanks to Sheila for helping us find both our speakers today. Sheila,
Yes, Sheila,
what a
good to see
great
you.
session.
You guys were
Good to see
great.
you.
Thank
Good
you
to
so
see you,
much.
Dr. Stewart. It's been a while. We haven't spoken in a while.
Chevy, I got to talk to you more.
All right, then,
And
take
Davida,
care.
it was
Take
so
care,
exciting.
everyone.
There were things I didn't know about your trajectory. I just loved hearing that.
Thanks, Sheila. It's so nice to always see your face here. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was great. Okay. All right.
All right, take
Talk
care.
to you all
Bye.
soon again,
See
I
you
hope.
soon.
Bye.
Bye.